July 27th, 1480. 4:17 in the morning. Rhodes, an Ottoman janissaries, battle-hardened veteran of a dozen sieges, charges through a breach in the fortress wall. His boots hit the rubble slope. Then something impossible happens. His feet shoot out from under him. He doesn't just slip. He launches backward, arms windmilling, crashing into the man behind him. That man topples into three more. Those three take down a dozen. Within seconds, 100 armored soldiers are sliding, tumbling, drowning in each other at the base of a 30-foot breach. This wasn't bad luck. This was engineered. The numbers alone defy all military logic. 500 knights defending against 70,000 Ottoman soldiers. That's a ratio of 140 to 1. These weren't just any attackers. This was the army that conquered Constantinople, that shattered the Byzantine Empire, that hadn't lost a major siege in 30 years. Against them stood the Knights monks, who controlled a single island fortress. But the Knights had been planning for 3 years, stockpiling something in their storerooms. Something the Ottoman spies saw and dismissed as kitchen supplies. They were wrong. What the defenders had weaponized was a substance so disgusting, so brilliantly simple, that when you learn what it was, you won't believe. Professional soldiers fell for it. Literally fell. By the thousands. By the end of this video, you'll understand 3 impossible things. First, the exact recipe of the Filth mixture that turned breached walls into killing grounds olive oil, rendered animal fat, and something far worse. Second, why 2,000 elite Ottoman warriors died in 20 minutes, without ever crossing swords with a single defender. Third, how a 57-year-old Grand Master, with 5 crossbow bolts lodged in his body, led a charge that shattered Ottoman morale forever. The stakes were absolute. Rhodes was Christendom's last fortress in the eastern Mediterranean. If it fell, nothing stood between the Ottoman Empire and Europe. The defenders knew it. The attackers knew it. And both sides knew that what was about to happen would change history. What happened next proved that sometimes the greatest weapon isn't steel or gunpowder. Sometimes it's physics, psychology, and human excrement. To understand how 500 men humiliated an empire, you need to know who these warriors were. The Knights Hospitaller weren't ordinary soldiers. They were warrior monks. Think of them as medieval special forces with vows of poverty, chastity, and absolute obedience. They'd controlled Rhodes since 1309, transforming a pirate haven into the most sophisticated fortress in the Mediterranean. Here's what made them terrifying. They were organized by longstongues representing the nations of Catholic Europe: France, Germany, England, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Provence, and Auvergne. Each long defended a specific section of wall. This created internal competition that drove defensive innovation to insane levels. No nation wanted to be the first to fall. Pierre d'Aubusson commanded them, 57 years old. French nobility. A man who slept in full armor during sieges, who'd studied every siege warfare manual from ancient Rome forward, who could calculate artillery trajectories in his head. Knights who served under him said he knew every stone in Rhodes' walls by memory. He would need every ounce of that genius. The Ottoman commander was Messi Pasha. Here's where it gets psychologically complex. He was born a Greek Christian. Captured as a boy, converted to Islam, rose through Ottoman ranks to become admiral of the fleet. Some whispered he still made the sign of the cross in private. Others said his conversion made him more ruthless, desperate to prove his loyalty by destroying Christianity's last eastern stronghold. The Ottoman force that appeared on the horizon in May 1480 was beyond massive. 70,000 regular infantry, Battle-hardened veterans from campaigns spanning 3 continents, 500 janissaries. The Sultan's elite. Christian boys taken as children, trained from birth to be the perfect killing machines. Each one could put 3 arrows through a breastplate. At 100 yards, 2,500 miners and siege engineers. Men who'd perfected bringing down walls from below and above. And the guns. 12 massive bombards, including one monster called the Basilisk, that required 100 oxen just to move. These were the same class of cannons that had shattered Constantinople's 1,000-year-old walls. Against this steel tsunami stood 500 knights, 2,000 professional soldier squires, sergeants, crossbowmen, and 3,000 armed civilians. Total, 5,500 defenders. Do the math. Each defender faced 14 attackers, but Rhodes had advantages the Ottomans didn't understand yet. The fortress was a masterpiece. Multiple defensive rings, walls 12 to 20 feet thick, towers reaching 90 feet. The Tower of St. Nicholas guarded the harbor like a stone giant. Every approach was pre-sighted for artillery. Every weak point had been reinforced over decades, and in the storerooms. Hidden from Ottoman spies, the real preparation was underway. Dobuson had issued strange orders starting 3 years earlier. Every household in Rhodes was required to surrender their stores of olive oil, animal fat from every butcher, tallow from every candle maker. The official reason given was fortress maintenance. The real reason was something else entirely. By May 1480, massive wooden barrels filled those storerooms, hundreds of them. The knights had also been collecting something else, something that made even hardened. Soldiers gag when they entered those storage chambers, human waste from every latrine in Rhodes, rotting animal carcasses, spoiled fish guts from the harbor, all rendered, mixed, aged for maximum putridity. The Ottomans would soon learn that sometimes the most sophisticated weapon is the most primitive substance. But first, they had walls to destroy. If you want to see how 500 knights, weaponized human waste, and animal filth to create the most humiliating military defeat in Ottoman history, and how Dobuson survived 5 crossbow bolts to lead the final charge, smash that like button right now. Everett Like pushes this forgotten story to people who need to hear it. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss these incredible true tales of military genius that textbooks forgot. Now back to Rhodes, where the Ottomans are about to learn what happens when you bring cannons to a filth fight. May 23rd, 1480. The first Ottoman cannon fired. The sound wouldn't stop for 89 days. 1,000 cannonballs per day. Do the math. That's one impact every 90 seconds, somewhere on the walls, for 3 solid months. The Tower of St. Nicholas absorbed the worst of it. Each hit sent shockwaves through stone that had stood for centuries. Mortar crumbled. Cracks. Spider-webbed. Dust clouds rose so thick the defenders fought in artificial twilight. But something unexpected happened. The rubble didn't clear away. It accumulated. Rough slopes began forming against the walls. Natural ramps created by the bombardment itself. The Ottomans saw opportunity. The knights saw something else entirely. Day 10. First breach appears near St. Mary's Tower. Day 20. Second breach opens in the Italian section. Day 30. Third breach, the critical one, forms at the post of St. Paul, where the French long held. Each breach created a slope of broken masonry at roughly 30 degrees, perfect for assault. Or so it seemed. While cannons pounded above ground, a different war raged below. Ottoman miners drove tunnels toward the foundations. The plan: pack them with gunpowder, bring down entire wall sections at once. But Rhodes had Greek fire specialists men who'd inherited Byzantine secrets. They detected vibrations using bowls of water placed along the walls, then dug intercept tunnels. The underground battles were fought in total darkness, knife against knife, men drowning in mud and blood. One Greek miner's account survived. "We heard them breathing before we saw their torches. Then hell came to earth, 20 feet below it." Daily life under siege developed a grim rhythm. Dawn, collect the dead from night raids. Morning, women and children hauled stones while night slept. Afternoon, prepare for evening bombardment. Night, raids, repairs, prayers. The Virgin of Palermo's Rhodes' sacred icon was carried around the walls every night. Soldiers swore. She pointed to where the next day's attacks would come. Modern historians note the icon's carrier was also the order's best military engineer. Perhaps divine inspiration had earthly help. By day 43, breaches gaped in the walls. Ottoman officers could taste victory. They didn't notice the defenders' strange behavior. Instead of clearing rubble from the breaches, the knights seemed to be ... shaping it. Smoothing slopes, calculating angles, and every night they brought barrels up from the storerooms. Not barrels of arrows, not barrels of stones. Barrels of something that made men gag when the lids came off. An Ottoman janissary captain wrote in his journal, "The Christians work at night like demons. They do not repair their walls. They do something to the fallen stones." My men report, strange. Smells like a kitchen before feast day, but wrong. Spoiled. Day 50. The mining war escalated. A Serbian master miner drove a tunnel under the bastion of St. George, packed with enough gunpowder to create a breach. No amount of rubble. Pufilled. Knights counterminers detected it barely in time. What they did next was pure medieval genius. Instead of intercepting, they dug beside it, then flooded both tunnels with Greek fire. When the Ottoman mine detonated, it went sideways instead of up. 100 miners died instantly. The little girl who saved the Auvergne section deserves special mention. Maria, fisherman's daughter, noticed ripples in water buckets along one wall. She'd felt earthquakes. This was different, rhythmic, human. Her warning came hours before a massive mine would have detonated. Dobson himself kissed her forehead in thanks. By mid-July, the moment of truth arrived. The Ottomans had created 3 perfect breaches. 20,000 troops massed for the final assault. And the knights had finally finished their preparations. Every breach slope had been treated. Every cauldron was ready. Every crossbowman knew his sector. At this point, the Ottomans had created 3 perfect breaches. 20,000 elite janissaries were about to charge through. The knights had no reinforcements coming, no escape possible. But what the Ottomans didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that, every night, for weeks, the defenders had been preparing something that would turn those breaches into slaughterhouses. Stay with me, because what happens next is the most ingenious defensive tactic in medieval warfare. Here's what the knights had created. The base layer, olive oil. 3 parts. The most slippery substance available in 1480, but oil alone wasn't enough, it would run off. Puddle unevenly, dry out in the July heat. Second ingredient, rendered animal fat. 2 parts. This gave the mixture body, made it cling to stone surfaces. Created a semi-solid layer that wouldn't evaporate. Third ingredient, soap, just enough to create foam to make the surface look deceptively solid while being impossibly slick. But Dobson didn't stop there. He added human waste. Latrines, had been emptied into rendering vats, not fresh-aged for maximum putridity. The stench alone could make a man vomit. Rotting animal carcasses, fish guts that had fermented in the summer heat, spoiled meat from the fortress stores, all of it rendered together in massive cauldrons, strained, mixed to exact proportions that Dobson had calculated based on the angle of the rubble. Slopes. The result was a substance that looked almost like mortar dust, gray-brown, innocuous. But the moment weight hit it, boots found no purchase, and it smelled like death's latrine. Period accounts describe the smell carrying hundreds of yards. Ottoman soldiers, approaching the breaches, gagged before they even reached the slopes. But military discipline is a powerful thing. They'd endured worse. They'd conquered half the known world. They didn't understand the physics yet. The knights added one more element. Sand mixed into the oil-fat filth base, not to add traction, the opposite. The sand created an abrasive slurry that clung to everything it touched. Once you stepped in it, it coated your boots. Made every subsequent step even worse than the eye. Sand particles. They also carried the filth deep into clothing, armor, joints, anywhere moisture collected. The psychological effect was calculated. Elite warriors could face death. They'd proven that across a dozen campaigns, but elite warriors facing humiliation, slipping, falling, landing in human excrement while their enemies laughed from above, that broke something fundamental. Dobson had weaponized shame. Then there was the heating element. Cauldrons of the mixture could be brought to boiling. Not just boiling, oil boiling, filth. Add quicklime powder, and you created a burning paste that stuck to skin. Ate through leather, found every gap in armor. A knight's account survives. We tested it on rocks. The coating lasted 3 days in the rain. Continued 10:23 p.m., WE tested. On a captured spy, the Sultan sent a man who volunteered for martyrdom. He begged for death within minutes of stepping onto the treated slope. Medieval warfare was brutal, but this crossed into something else. Psychological warfare designed to make your enemy helpless. To make elite soldiers feel like fools. By July 27th, every breach had been treated. Barrels stood ready for refills. Cauldrons boiled. The breaches looked climbable. Rough rubble at a perfect assault angle. It was a trap more sophisticated than anything the Romans had conceived. The Ottomans were about to charge into the most humiliating defeat in their empire's history. And they had no idea. July 27, 1480, 4 a.m. The Ottoman War Council made its decision. 3 breaches. 20,000 troops. The elite janissaries would lead warriors who'd never known defeat. The target, the post of St. Paul, 30 feet wide. Rubble slope at 35 degrees. Defended by the French Longu at 4:15 a.m. Ottoman drums thundered the attack signal. 20,000 voices roared as one. Allahu Akbar. The ground shook with running feet. The first wave 500 janissaries charged at full sprint. These men had stormed fortresses from Baghdad to Belgrade. Rhodes would be no different. 4:17 a.m. The first warrior hit the breach slope. His boot came down on what looked like dry rubble. The moment his weight shifted, his foot shot sideways. The oil-fat filth mixture had zero friction. He windmilled his arms, trying to recover. Physics didn't care about his training. He went down hard, the man behind him, charging at full speed in 60 pounds of armor, couldn't stop. He tripped over the falling body, crashed into 2 more soldiers. Within 5 seconds, 50 men were down. Here's where it became a nightmare. Men in armor don't get up quickly, especially not on a 35-degree slope, covered in oil and human waste. They scrambled for purchase. Feet slipped. Hands found no grip. Every movement sent them sliding further down, and the men behind them kept charging. The breach became a human avalanche. Soldiers piled 4, 5, 6 deep. Those at the bottom were crushed by the weight of armored men above them. Those in the middle couldn't tell which way was up. Those at the top slipped down into the growing mass of tangled limbs and screaming men. From the walls above, hospital crossbowmen had perfect targets. These weren't moving warriors, requiring lead time and aim adjustment. These were men struggling to stand, crawling, trapped in oppressive bodies. Each crossbowman could loose 8 bolts per minute. 50 crossbowmen meant 400 bolts per minute, raining into a space 30 feet wide. Statistical brutality. Every bolt found flesh. In 20 minutes, 2,000 Ottoman soldiers died on that single breach. Not from sword combat. Not from heroic lass stands. They died slipping, falling, drowning in each other while covered in oil and human excrement. The humiliation was complete, but Ottoman commanders adapted quickly. Bring sand from the siege works, sawdust, anything to cover the oil. Bags of dirt flew hand to hand. For a moment, it worked. Fresh gained footing on the sand-covered sections. Then the knights unveiled their next adaptation. New cauldrons appeared on the walls. Not cold mixture. Boiling mixture. Oil, fat, filth, and quicklime, heated to 200 degrees. They poured it onto the sand. Imagine the scene. The boiling liquid hit the sand and created instant steam clouds. Quicklime powder found gaps in armor, burned through leather, ate into exposed skin. Men who'd maintained footing suddenly screamed, clawing at their eyes. The sand didn't provide traction anymore. It became burning paste. The breach transformed into a vision of hell. Steam obscured everything. Screams echoed in a dozen languages. The stench oil, blood, burning flesh, voided bowels, and human waste made even hardened warriors vomit. One janissary, Officer Hassan the Bold, actually made it to the top of the breach. For 30 seconds, he fought 3 knights simultaneously. His scimitar was a blur. Then his foot found an oil patch. As he fell, a knight's mace found his helmet. His body rolled down the slope, knocking down a dozen men trying to climb a French knight's account captures it. They came like lions and died like sheep. The breach drank their blood, mixed it with filth, created a crimson mud that no man could cross. I saw elite warriors, men who'd conquered half the world, reduced to crawling, slipping, dying without ever crossing swords with us. Double quotes. 20,000. Ottomans charged. The breach swallowed them like quicksand, and then something impossible happened. Pierre d'Aubusson stood on the second defensive line, directing the defense. The breaches were holding, barely. But the sheer weight of Ottoman numbers was beginning to tell. Then he saw it. A section of janissaries had punched through on the left. They'd gained the walls. If they held that position, they could flank the entire French defense. D'Aubusson grabbed his sword and moved forward. That's when 5 crossbow bolts found him, almost simultaneously. One punched through his shoulder, another lodged in his thigh. 3 more penetrated his breastplate, testament to Ottoman marksmanship. Even in chaos, blood pooled at his feet. His aides rushed forward. "My lord, you must. A Grand Master dies standing," he growled. Then, incredibly, he pushed forward. This is the part that sounds like fantasy, but is documented fact. D'Aubusson, 57 years old. 5 crossbow bolts embedded in his body, streaming. Blood grabbed the banner of the Knights Hospitaller and charged down into the breach. Not from above. He descended into the killing ground itself. Rhodes, Rhodes. St. John, and victory. The effect was electric. Knights rotating off the walls saw their Grand Master, who should have been dead or unconscious, advancing into the filth-covered breach with the Order's banner held high, blood mixed with oil on his armor. He looked like a vision of war itself. Every defender who could hold a weapon followed. The countercharge hit Ottoman forces, just as they'd finally gained the breach's summit through sheer weight of numbers. But now they faced knights fighting in a religious frenzy. Led by a man who physics said should have been dead, Dobson's sword never stopped moving. Witnesses describe him killing 5 men in single combat. Each strike, perfect. Each movement, economical. He fought like a machine that happened to be bleeding from 6 places. Modern historians speculate. Adrenaline, opium for pain. Perhaps the body's natural endorphins. Contemporary accounts called it miraculous. Ottoman soldiers looked up from the breach and saw their nightmare. A blood-soaked old man who wouldn't die, followed by knights singing hymns as they killed. Someone screamed in Turkish, "The Grand Master cannot die. Their God protects them." And that's when Ottoman morale ready. Cracking shattered completely. The panic started in the center, spread like wildfire. Men who'd faced death across 3 continents suddenly broke. The ordered assault became a rout. Bodies created additional obstacles. Ottoman soldiers trying to retreat slipped on the same oil that had doomed their advance. The surface that trapped their charge now trapped their escape. Knights waded into the press, maces and swords rising and falling with mechanical precision. This wasn't battle anymore. It was butchery. By noon, it was over. The Ottomans pulled back from all 3 breaches. Elite unitsmen who'd never retreated fled, in disorder, as the sun reached its zenith. The impossible had happened. 500 knights had stopped 70,000 soldiers. Not with superior technology, not with divine intervention, with olive oil, animal fat, human waste, and the weaponization of humiliation. If this story gave you chills, if you felt that moment when Dobson charged down into hell itself with 5 bolts in his body, hit that like button right now. Seriously. Every single like tells YouTube to show this to more people. These stories deserve to be remembered. The casualty count came at sunset. 9,000 Ottoman dead. In a single day, the breach at the post of St. Paul alone held 3,500 corpses in a space 30 feet wide. Bodies piled so high the last attackers had been climbing over their own dead. The knights lost 200 men, 40% casualty rate among those engaged. But they'd held, against impossible odds, they'd held. Dalbason's survival defied medical logic. 5 crossbow bolts, massive blood, fighting for hours in full armor under the July sun when his aides finally convinced him to accept treatment. The surgeon brother Dominic, a German who'd studied in Paris, found something remarkable. 2 bolts had missed major organs by finger widths. The others had struck armor reinforcement points, penetrating but not deeply. The surgery happened without anesthesia, just wine and opium. Dobson insisted on staying conscious, dictating orders while brother Dominic extracted arrowheads. "If I sleep," he said, "they'll think me dead. Rhodes needs to see its master standing." He appeared on the walls that very evening, bandaged but upright. The Ottoman camp that night was chaos incarnate. Wounded men screamed for water. The stench of defeat, literal and metaphorical, hung over everything. Desertion started immediately. Provincial troops, seeing what happened to the elite janissaries, simply melted into darkness. By dawn, 5,000 men had vanished. Disease followed defeat like a loyal dog. Dysentery spread through the Ottoman camp. 70,000 men in summer heat, with inadequate sanitation. Within a week, more would die from disease than had fallen in the assault. What broke Ottoman morale wasn't just death. It was the method of death. Elite warriorsmen, who'd conquered from Baghdad to Belgrade, reduced to slipping and falling in filth, while peasant crossbowmen picked them off. The humiliation was unbearable. Muslim prisoners taken in the assault reported something that shocked them: Christian mercy. Instead of execution, they received medical treatment, food, water, respect. Many converted, not from force, from the cognitive dissonance of expecting barbarity and finding humanity. On August 17th, a full 3 weeks after the assault, Messi Pasha made his decision. We sail with the morning tide. The withdrawal was more panic than strategy. Ottomans abandon tons of supplies, several cannons too heavy to move quickly, hundreds of wounded left behind. The great basilisk, the monster gun that had shattered the Tower of St. Nicholas, was spiked and abandoned. As Ottoman sails disappeared over the horizon, church bells rang across Rhodes. Not frantic alarm bells. The steady, triumphant peal. For victory! Dobson ordered something remarkable: honorable burial for all Ottoman dead. Knights and Turks were separated, but both received proper rites. The mass graves were marked with simple stones, brave men far from home. Even in victory, chivalry endured. Maria the fisherman's daughter, who detected the mineries, a posthumous honor unique in the order's history. She'd died in a bombardment 3 days after the assault. Dobson had her name inscribed as Sister Maria, defender of the faith, enemy of mines, friend of Christ. Her parents received a pension for life. The victory at Rhodes would echo far beyond these blood-stained walls. Rhodes bought Christendom. 42 years in 1522, Suleiman the Magnificent returned with overwhelming force. 200,000 men. The knights, after a 6-month siege, finally surrendered with honor. But those 42 years mattered. They gave Europe time to strengthen, to prepare, to unite. When the Ottomans finally took Rhodes, they faced a different Europe, one that had learned the lessons of 1480. Ottoman military manuals immediately adapted. Never again would they assume a breach meant victory. New siege protocols specifically addressed the Rhodes problem: how to assault rubble slopes. Countermeasures were developed: wooden planking, advanced sand supplies, special boots with spikes. The age of simple, overwhelming force had ended. European reaction was electric. The last crusading victory, they called it. Dobson was made a cardinal, dying in 1503 with full papal honors. But more importantly, military engineers across Europe studied Rhodes obsessively. How had medieval walls stopped modern artillery? How had 500 knights stopped 70,000 soldiers? The answer revolutionized fortress design. The Star Fortlow, angular, designed to create killing fields, evolved directly from Rhodes' lessons. The principle was the same: don't just block the enemy. Channel them into zones where physics and firepower multiply defensive advantage. From Vienna to Malta, a new generation of fortresses rose. The slippery breach tactic spread like wildfire. Every fortress from Vienna to Malta stockpiled oil and fat. Manuals detailed exact mixture ratios, optimal pouring timing, how to combine with quicklime for maximum effect. What started as disparate innovation became standard practice. Modern military historians draw parallels to asymmetric warfare. When facing overwhelming numbers, defenders must multiply their force through environmental manipulation. Make the enemy fight the terrain. Not just you, but Rhodes teaches deeper lessons. The knights didn't have secret weapons or superior technology. They had olive oil, something any cook possessed. They had gravity available to all. They had human waste impossible to avoid. What they really had was creativity. The genius to combine common elements into uncommon advantage. Dobuson's own writings survived. The enemy expects us to fight as we have always fought. Our victory lies in fighting as no one has fought before. This principle tactical innovation over traditional Valerie-shaped military thinking. Forever, 500 knights. Made 70,000 soldiers slip and fall, not through magic. Through the weaponization of physics, psychology, and filth. Sometimes, the greatest victories come not from strength, but from making your enemy's strength worthless. If this story of 500 knights humiliating 70,000 soldiers with human waste and genius, tactics moved you at all, if you have even a shred of respect for Dobuson, taking 5 bolts and charging into hell, do me a favor right now. Hit that like button. Every single like pushes this story to people who need to hear it. YouTube's algorithm decides who sees. Spaced on those likes. Make this story visible. Hit subscribe and smash that notification bell. We're pulling these forgotten battles from the archives every single week. Medieval warfare, World War II stories, ancient tactics, the battles, the textbooks forgot, the strategies that changed history, the warriors who deserved better than silence. Now drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from? Are you in France, where Dobuson was born? Turkey, where his enemies trained? The United States? Australia? Germany? Our community spans the entire globe. You're not just watching history. You're keeping it alive. Tell me your location. Tell me if you've been to Rhodes. Tell me which part of this battle shocked you most. The filth mixture? The 5 crossbow bolts? The 9,000 casualties in a single day? Just let me know you're here. Pierre Dobuson never sought fame, never wrote memoirs, never toured Europe as a conquering hero. He went back to running a monastery on an island most people couldn't find on a map. The only reason we know this story is because a few monks kept records in a fortress archive. Without videos like this, his genius disappears completely. That's why this channel exists. To make sure warriors like Dobuson, men who saved civilization, with olive oil, animal fat, and human shit, don't vanish into silence. To prove that the greatest weapons aren't always the most expensive or the most technological. Sometimes, the greatest weapon is just seeing what everyone else missed. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about these forgotten stories. Thank you for making sure Pierre Dobuson doesn't disappear into the pages of unread history books. These defenders deserve to be remembered. You're helping make that happen. I'll see you in the next one.